arguably the best I've ever timed that run. Arguably the best that's ever been. Welcome back to another weekly stream here on the Behavioral Intelligence Forum. We've got a juicy topic for you today, one that seems to be equally divisive in its opinions, as alluring in its intellectual sex appeal. And it is this notion that we've just termed, as in we here have termed, body language isn't real. And the way that we mean that as a statement is that human beings cannot be learnt as you would a secondary language. Right? If you are gonna come up to the plate and start to talk to people about the movement of an elbow as being significant of some deep transient thought or something that's happening within you, it's it's tantamount to a nonsensical statement by itself, right? By itself, and it is down to. I've always referenced it as the BuzzFeed generation. It's got the same amount of backing as what kind of pizza topping are you, right? They are representative on a similar kind of platform when you think about human beings as a this means this kind of approach. Now, are we saying that non-verbal behaviour should be discounted? No, not at all. Far from it. It's just when you take these things in isolation, and when you take these things as immediate conversions for data, in the BuzzFeed articles that give you 10 ways to spot a liar, 10 ways to know if he or she is cheating on you. Shut up. That's what I would say first of all. That's quite that's quite opinionated on my part for sure, but based primarily on experience more so than anything. How about you, Bob? What's your views on this topic?
Well, it's been a big week, hasn't it, really? Because
Massive.
I'm my own worst enemy, really, because it riles me so much that I did put a post on LinkedIn about this and about, it was based on the Trump thing from last week
Mm.
and the sort of response it's got from body language experts crawling out of the woodwork from everywhere, putting things on it. And the thing that really got me is some lady, and I think she was from India, I think, put on there, she put two stills of the two participants in it and made grand claims about what they meant. And my comment was to her afterwards, well, so what? This is just a moment in time. Yeah, you may or may not be correct in your assessment of that, but in the scheme of it, so what? So how great you are. You've been able to tell in 1 microsecond what these people meant or what they may have been feeling at that moment, but it does not in any way give you a view of that person. Um,
Yeah.
that instant is just an instant in time. If that happened constantly, then it might mean something, but
Mm.
on its own, it means nothing. And then we get to the thing that she's a body language expert taught by an ex-CIA agent on an online course and a guy, Paul Ekman, whose science is now known to be totally out of date and out of time.
Yeah.
And then you think that that gives you the right to call yourself an expert. And 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 it doesn't matter. It's on social media. People will read it. But when it
Mm.
does matter is, as I put in that post, it's when judges begin to believe this sort of thing and juries begin to believe this sort of thing and police officers and
Mm.
people who matter, when they start to believe this, then we have got a problem, because it then impinges on people and it makes people less of themselves, and it restricts open communication, and that's where I think it's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the notion to me, first of all, it implies that when somebody calls themselves a body language expert,
Hmm.
and I might be being far too picky. I might be being far too picky because it bugs me. It might totally be that. But you kind of illustrate from the start that you don't really truly understand the subject matter, because how can you be an expert in all people when I would be willing to bet parts of my body that you've not met everyone. So
Yeah.
you might be an expert or competent in these sweeping rules of thumb that would apply to certain people in certain situations. Good for you. But the notion of being a body language expert, it's expertise in something that you can never achieve. Not, I mean, take body language aside for a second, but whether you regard the term as being accurate or not, just put that aside for for 1 second. You can't achieve expertise in all human behavior because there's to me there's no way to get the data on all humans without interacting with all humans. Even
Mm.
the studies that we're so fond of going to, and the books, and the case studies and the research and all of this is wonderful for groups. It's
Mm.
wonderful for groups, and it's wonderful kind of statistical analyses that we can use when interacting to kind of inform our decision. But it's when we start operating in the they have not blinked in a while, therefore they must be thinking along these particular lines. If you operate with that degree of certainty, it's biased
Mm.
the whole way. It's biased by the model and doesn't allow for that freedom.
Mm.
The whole thing. Like I always quote an analogy from a couple of the body language guys that I know, who've since left. They used to write for like newspapers and magazines and the like, those kind of articles. But years ago, like in the early '90s, so they left the whole thing because it became all about just confirming the court of public opinion
Yeah.
using kind of scientific analyses. And when Harry and Meghan did their interview with Oprah,
Yeah.
there was the discussion about Meghan being on the verge of tears, and the eye behaviour that was going on there. And I was like, okay, it could be this, but it also could be the fact that if you look at the way the leaves are blowing behind her, the wind is blowing in her face.
Mm.
So it would dry your eyes out to a certain degree, that if for
Mm.
some might provide some kind of discomfort, which would mean you do this all the time. I know for me, I've got quite long eyelashes as a man. With statistically speaking, we don't have the longer eyelashes, and when I wear my glasses, my eyelashes kind of scrape down the front of the frame. So every now and again, I'm like this. I'm pulling apart at my eyes, and it's nothing that's connected towards like the textbooks would determine a nervousness and lint picking and self-soothing and all of this type of stuff.
Mm.
My eyelashes are just folded together, but they do it regularly because I have to wear
Mm.
my glasses a lot. And it's these types of contextual approaches that that never really get considered. You know?
No, no, it's right. I mean, if we go back to, without getting into the politics, it's about with doing analysis of their behaviour. One thing you
Yeah.
can say from that Oval Office is it was quite obvious that there was a clash of culture there, if nothing else. But you've got to bear in mind, you've got a guy who is in Europe, but he's the eastern side of Europe, and their behaviour, having worked in Eastern Europe, their behaviour is different to Western
Yeah.
Europe and to the US. And plus, on top of that, you had a guy who maybe the art of the deal, but it certainly wasn't the art of negotiation. So there was no commonality between them. And so it's the environment and it's the culture which never really get considered when you're looking at that, and all the way back to Robert Sapolsky when he's talking about these things, and he talks about how juries will look at people's coloured skin, and that would affect, it's been shown through research that affects their decision-making process. And so you've got all these things at play, and then you've got the biology and the chemicals going on, and all we can really say is at particular times we can use valence to maybe get an idea and say, well, that at that moment he wasn't feeling positive or
Yeah.
negative, and that's how that's how I now, with the people I work with, quantify everything. Don't worry about what facial expressions mean, what this body language means. Is what you're seeing in that moment positive or negative? If you're a police officer walking to the side of a car in the middle of the night, you don't care whether his facial expression says this or that. You just want to see if the behavior he's exhibiting is to you at that moment positive or negative. And that's,
I mean,
that's
go
what
on,
it
sorry.
comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, completely. One could argue then that what would be an acceptable term? The operator, whomever it is that is doing the observing, right? Whatever that role is for whatever position you are in around the world. How are you going to attempt to understand the complexities of human behavior from somebody that isn't you when you can't get out of your own way enough to understand somebody else's displays? The thing that cracked me up about the whole White House argument was the notion of thanks. Right? Have you even said thanks? Right? I wonder if because there's video footage of him actually thanking the Americans many
Yeah,
times. But
yeah.
putting that to one side, I wonder if it would have been the same if someone from the Orient would have come in and just bowed,
Mm,
right? If they'd have just bowed and they didn't say thank you. Well, that's not how somebody from that area of the world says thank you, and it's exactly what you're saying from here. Like, I don't know anyone in the Ukraine or from that neck of the woods, but I've got a few friends in Serbia, and certainly some of the ways that we talk to each other, it's different between England and Serbia, let alone
mm,
America and Serbia. Some of the expressions, some of the ways that we emote in the UK is far more expressive
mm,
physically, in the face and physically with the arms and everything else, compared to somewhere like Serbia. Not that they are without emotion, because they're not at all. They just do it in different ways.
yeah.
This there was there was this. I'm going to have to just think a moment for the name of the system. Uh, uh, Cross cultural communication.
Mm,
Cross cultural communication. Good friend of mine, Matthew. He was on my podcast a while back. Expert in cross cultural communication. Uses the TV show. Uh, 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 and can I just say, I use the term expert as a pun. He operates the same way that there's always more to learn. He uses the TV show The Office as
mm,
an illustration of the kind of cross cultural communication ideas, because there are so many different versions. Right? They
mm,
might have that kind of awkward office based satire at its heart, but the Arabic cultural version of The Office, the things that they talk about and will make them awkward, will be very different to the English one. Will be very
mm,
different to the American one. Will be very different to. If memory serves, there was an Australian version on Amazon Prime a while back, and I think there's at least over 10 versions
yeah.
of The Office around the world that you can watch and see these same situations kind of unfurling in different ways. Yes, it's TV, but it's TV that is made for a specific culture to understand, to elicit a
Mm,
specific comedic response. And these are the types of things that, at least in my humble, member of the ignorant public based opinion,
mm,
is that these experts, whatever side of the woodwork they tend to crawl out from, do it with their own goal in mind,
yeah.
right? They do it with their own goal in mind, and I've done a couple of those videos, and any observation that I've heard people make about the video, I'm like, yes, well, it could be, but it also could be this, could be this, could be this, could be this,
Yeah.
could be this, and ultimately, from our position, we have no way of confirming, none, because we weren't there,
Yeah.
right? We weren't there.
Yeah. An example I always give of this culture thing is I used to work in the Arab states a lot, and then I moved to the Far East, and I was doing a lot of work in Malaysia. And I can remember the very first time I went there, I was presenting a 2 day course, and I'd done the first hour maybe, and we had a coffee break. And one of the participants came up to me and she asked me what language I was speaking in. But I finally found out that what she meant is she didn't understand the context of what I was saying. The context was completely, so what I was saying would be all right for a UK audience, but
Mm.
for an audience where their English is maybe their, if they're Chinese, Malaysian, then it might be their third language even. And
Yeah.
that Zelensky, it's the same, wasn't it? That English is his third language. And the context of what I was saying, the words made sense, but the context and the way I was saying them didn't work for them. And I think that's another thing with that, maybe the last thing on that White Office thing is that why didn't he have an interpreter? Because a lot of those problems would have been exacerbated, I think, if he'd have had an interpreter, because it could have slowed things down, it would have given him
Yeah.
time to think. And also, maybe if he had a good interpreter, they would make sure that the words that were said could not be misconstrued, because a couple of times they jumped on what he was saying, not because what he was saying was wrong, but more the context in what he was saying it and how he was saying it. And when you had that sort of adversarial type of situation, because I've seen it in negotiations where one just they want to prove a point, so they just jump on everything the other party's saying to score points. And that's all that was going on. That was a massive point scoring done in public.
I mean, yeah, we could obviously pull the situation apart from the ground
Oh,
up,
yeah.
but it would kind of transpire to everyone else that watches like we're being political. We aren't. We
No.
like we have our own political viewpoints, sure, but we're talking about the understanding of human behavior, of the body language
Yeah.
that was going on, of
Yeah.
the movements and the way that people were interacting. It is. I mean, let's kind of change gears away from the White House then, as you said.
Yeah.
That
I
let's
think it's
let's leave
probably
that the
best.
last thing. So let's take this as a question then. I have my own thoughts. Why do you think then that body language experts, regardless of where they go to, whether it be YouTube, the radio, newspapers, whatever, why do you believe, or why do you think that they are in such high regard as people that understand the nuances of human behavior?
Because I think it's a thing about human nature. I mean, this is the thing. If you've ever been in unfamiliar situations, you don't feel comfortable. We like to know. And I think this makes people think that they get a deeper understanding of other people, and it's quick. And if we want to do a course, are we going to do a university course I've just seen one today that's 5 years long for forensic psychology? Or are we gonna stick with that? Are we that interested when we can do a 30-minute online thing and to our mind get what we need?
Mm.
How useful it is, and we don't usually think about that. We're quite our brains are lazy anyway. We don't use the full capacity of our brains, but we're
Mm.
always looking for quick fixes.
Mm.
And I
Mm.
think we like things that we think will give us an advantage.
Mm. Mm. I
And
mean,
the term is
go on.
sexy. That seems sexy. So, we go
That
for that.
that's what I've always thought of it as. Like the whole kind of concept is just it's intellectual sex appeal.
Yeah.
And I've not spoken to anybody that watches, and granted, I've not spoken to many people that watch these videos or read these kind of stuff. Maybe 20 in total, which is nothing as a sample. But of the 20 people that I have spoken to, and the comments that I've seen, nobody's watching these things to understand how someone understands human behavior. They are watching to try and confirm their viewpoints or argue with somebody else that holds different viewpoints, right? And at the end of the day, all that does is that hurts your ability to understand anything, because then the generation that we live in sees all content interest. Let's just do more of the same thing, and it gets away from the original kind of aid that
Mm.
the content was looking to go through. I mean, like, can you imagine the difference if somebody spent, like, I don't know, what's the average length of one of these videos? Say 30 minutes, right?
Mm.
If somebody spent 30 minutes explaining all of the finer points of behavioral nuance from a scientific perspective, a neuroscientific perspective, psychological perspective, all of these kind of disciplines on how people move their hands from around the world.
Yeah,
Can people still sit through the same thing?
yeah,
I would be willing to bet they couldn't. It's very much as you were saying. I've done one of my degrees is in forensic psych, so I understand. And the 5 year compared to the 2 week program, and every now and again I will take one of these 2 week programs, not because I care about my CV. I haven't shown anyone my CV in years, but I'm more concerned with, if it's a topic that I'm interested in, that I already think that I know a bit about anyway. Whether I do or not is a matter for testing in a different situation. But I will go and look and try and analyze the course itself to see what points they could be leaving
yeah,
out, just for the sake of pushing some kind of certification away. So in the end, then we could make an argument for how truthful this would be. Would be dependent on the research and the legwork we could do. Is
mm,
that the reason for this kind of reliance on body language as a communicable piece of models and things that can get us understanding? It's down to a generational thing. We're moving towards, don't care how we get it, just get it. I don't
yeah.
care how briefly it takes, whether it's 5 minutes, 2 hours. Go, 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 now, now, now. And to me, the whole thing kind of contributes towards many cognitive biases, like the Google effect and the hindsight bias. Right?
Mm.
People watch these videos. I knew they're hiding something. No, if you
Yeah,
could rationally explore that detail, you didn't. And we've got the internet. We've got the world's knowledge at our fingertips, but we don't seek to understand things. We go, what does this mean? Ask Google. Oh, it means that. We don't learn anything. By default, it requires more work on our part. Like, I mean, this almost impolite to ask, but like, how many years would you say you've been studying this? Not just working, not just using. How many years have you been studying this, would you say?
well, I would say that my first um, knowledge of the power of this was when I was as young as 15, 16, not realizing that I was a bit of an outsider, and was very quiet and was always on the outside, an observer rather than a participant, and picking up on behavior then, which
Yeah,
when I joined the police, it always amazed me to initially that I didn't think of it as a job because it was just talking to people and whatever that type of thing is, whereas other people found it really hard.
yeah,
And that's, I suppose, so I think I've always done it, but to actually say that I understand it, I think my understanding changes all the time. If you were to speak to me and come on a course that I ran 10 years ago, it would look nothing like this. But then things are accelerating to such an extent now with fMRI and all the other things that are going alongside it, and the thinking around it all is much more rounded now. It's still not perfect, but it's much more
yeah,
rounded. So I would say I feel that I've got a reasonable knowledge over about the last 7 or 8 years.
yeah.
I
I
would
mean,
say.
there we go. Even the last 7 or 8 years, whether you think 15, whatever, it's longer than a simple YouTube review.
Oh yeah, yeah. The funny thing is
Exactly.
that I won't say names or anything, but when I first this is about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe quite a while ago. I saw a guy on YouTube, and I saw he was ex-police, and he just said it quite glibly, and that sort of perked my interest a little bit. So I did a bit of research, and he served about 3 or 4 years as a uniformed cop. So to call himself a police officer of any standing was probably stretching it a little bit. And he was doing these videos, and he's been used by the Daily Mirror, and people like that have used him. But
I see.
anyway, what I did, I linked with him on LinkedIn, and he did a video. He was on Good Morning Britain or something. So he did a
Okay.
video, and so I did an analysis of him, and I posted it to him on LinkedIn, and he blocked me.
Amazing. Yeah.
Because, you know, the thing about this is that, yeah, unless you're doing it from the right mindset, you're going to be biased anyway. And,
Yeah.
you've got to know yourself before you know other
Mm,
people. And you've got to
totally.
understand yourself. And a lot of the times when I'm doing analysis, I've got to think of it, well, what am I doing this from? Is this from a biased position?
Mm,
Because we've all got biases, and
totally.
the thing to doing accurate assessments is you firstly got to understand your own biases. And
Yep.
then, if you're only, even if you're only doing it through valence and saying, well, that looks positive, that looks negative to me, you've got to think to yourself, well, why am I thinking that? Is that just my own personal perspective? And so then you look for the recurring. So what we're talking about is the only way, in my mind, to actually assess people is to look for verified and patterns of behavior. And once you understand a person's pattern of behavior, not a baseline, because a baseline is which
It can
everyone
change.
everyone in
Yeah.
their world is using that now, isn't
Mm,
what you're actually looking for. You're looking for their person's own personal behavior,
yeah.
because something that we may, through our knowledge, because that's all we're doing when we're assessing them. We're assessing them against our own knowledge and understanding. And when you see someone doing a gesture or using, or like I'm doing at the moment, touching their ear, that means nothing if they do it. Just like that
Yeah.
photograph of Trump and Zelensky mean nothing. It's if they constantly do it, and whether they, and then you have to look at what is happening at the same time. What is what is the context of it? What has come before it? What comes after it? Do they repeat that action? Then you can start thinking, well, are they doing that at a positive sign, a stage of the conversation, or a negative stage? What are the words they use? Are they using connecting words or disengaging words? And then you can start putting it all together. Going online and saying this, he did this gesture, so it obviously means this. If you believe that totally misrepresented thing from Albert Meribian, is it? I think I can never pronounce his.
Yeah. The percentage of Albert
That
Moravian. Yeah.
55% is of communication is body language. If you're only going on body language, you're still, if you even believe that, which is total crap, but even if you believe that, then you're still cutting out 45% of what else is happening. So how can that be right? How can you sit there and on a panel or whatever and say, oh, this definitely means this. This is him being, yeah, okay, you
Yeah.
might be able to tell. There's two things that we can all see in other people, whether they're frightened or whether they're smiling and engaged. We can all
Yeah.
see that. We don't need a body language expert to tell us that.
No.
But the reasons why they're smiling or why they're disengaged is actually what we're looking for. It's not what
Yeah.
they're doing, it's why they're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, beautiful. That should be that should be all on a t-shirt, I reckon. Julie in the chat says most of them don't go anywhere close to psychology, context, or some other kind of diagnostics that could help to explain certain behaviors. They stop at behavior. Period.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah,
but it would be the same thing if somebody was just going on The Voice, if someone was just going on one other option, just going on something else, right? It is about everything. If we're looking to understand humans, then it's got to be about everything that the human is interacting with.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And the environment they're in is really
Yeah.
important. I mean, I usually say to people I work with, but I can remember once going into a very senior person's office, and straight away seeing that he had all these certificates on the wall of his achievements, and he had a great big desk, and my chair was lower than him. So I
Yeah.
know now, I've got a good idea what type of
Yeah.
person that is. He's a
Yeah.
controlling person. And so
Yeah.
that tailored how I spoke to him and how I presented myself to him,
Mhm.
because I want to play to his ego. And
Yeah.
so if we disregard that, and just to mention it once again, is we're in the Oval Office of America, the most powerful. Of course, someone's going to look small in that, especially if they're being berated. What do we
Yeah.
expect? That, and so we can, yeah, and so in a way, I mean, it's never good when you're doing it from afar anyway afterwards, because you don't know the dynamics. You cannot know the dynamics unless you're in the room with them. And I know that from police interviews that have been videoed and then they're played at court. The jury cannot get the whole picture of what it was like in that room. You can't do it. You're just observing after the fact. And so
And this
it's
is,
completely
come on,
different.
sorry. Yeah. 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 100%. This is why I say hindsight bias.
Mm,
It's a thing. To lean into those, to give yourself a kind of attaboy, to give yourself a pat on the back for somebody else coming to a conclusion that you had no part in, right? You need the action of going through it to know if you can actually observe somebody else. If you make a living on the understanding of human behavior, but it's only through photos and videos, then it's not a representation of their behavior. It's a sample of however many minutes or brief period in time the photo was taken of them acting on a single day in a single moment. That doesn't necessarily translate out, right? you,
mm,
you couldn't look you couldn't look at a photo of somebody in a kind of position, like fists up, eyebrows pulled together,
mm.
tense jaw, all of the classics, and go, God, they're angry in there. They'll make anger faces like that the whole time. When if you put this same kind of position with like a barbell in their hand, it's just
Yeah,
struggling at a bench press or something. It's just
yeah.
it's putting effort in. Again, yeah, Julie's just said from the comments, you could be acting for the photo. There could be all manner of things that go on. So again, arguments could be made that the understanding of any kind of human behavior, any kind of non-verbal communication, is less about some conversion principle and more about critical thinking, more about
Mm,
context, and more about the following and possibility of change to develop an understanding of their personal behavioral repertoire
yeah.
and understanding of their patterns around that,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
And yeah,
100,
I'm doing it again
100%.
now.
And
uh,
this is the thing, is that what body language is just observing behavior, observing certain gestures that people are making. That tells you nothing.
mm,
That's only observable. It's not
mm,
a knowledge of what's going on inside. And I think the thing that really sort of focused me on how I looked at this was Robert Sapolsky, when he says, what is going through that person's mind a minute, a second, a minute, 2 minutes, back to the beginning of evolution, that has all
mm,
come in to what that is happening in that second. And it's the behavior we see. We've got to understand not just that this is a behavior. Julie's in Canada, and I was in Canada for an extended period over Christmas, and I picked up on their behavior, how they phrase things and how they behave, and the things they say, and the more conversational styles that they have. And it is different to the UK, just like America's different, just like everywhere's
mm.
different. Ukraine is different. And to think that we can observe someone from a different culture like that and immediately pick up on those instances, unless we are doing it from a forensic point of view and a very open-minded point of view, it's never going to happen. And it's not going to happen with a £50 body language course. that has been done on science, which if we're honest, it's all science has been based in Western um, universities. It's not science that's been done in Asia or wherever. It is very, very westernized, and our
Mm.
understanding of it is. And the way I think it doesn't matter what their behavior is. And I don't try to analyze people's behavior to try and make a conclusion about them. I just accept that their behavior is their behavior. And my part in that interaction then is to try and align myself with them, accept that no matter what they're doing, that's the way they are. And I align myself with them. And once you start aligning yourself with them, then you start to mirror them, even without meaning to do it. And once you do that, then you get that neural coupling where you start to think on the same level, and then you're off.
100%.
So what
Julie
it's
says,
about, yeah,
go
go
on,
on.
sorry.
No,
No,
what it's
finish it.
about,
Finish your thought first.
what it's about is not looking at differences, it's looking at similarities
Yeah.
and aligning yourself with those similarities. That's how you do it. And then you can spot when they're upset or that it's a negative because you're thinking like them. You're one with them if you can get that.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a strong open mind to be able to do it. That's why I say critical thinking.
Yeah.
It's got to be put forth. Julie says, did you appreciate it, Bob, in Canada, all the behaviour stuff that you experienced?
Yeah, I did. I did very much so. And my sons in-laws, so they're related to us, were very what I did like about Canada and what came across so much to me, and I don't know if this is just her family, but the extended family, they were, I mean, you see this thing about, the high context and low context cultures, and
Mm.
high context cultures, I think it's that way round. High context cultures are very family orientated and and that's what I think of Canada. They were very, very family orientated, and it's a vast country with not as many people in it, but where there is a great sense of community there. And that's why I think the United States have made a terrible mistake to take them on, because they seem to be um, very community based. And so their language and behavior is very much like that. People that I'd never met before would want to hug me. Although we have got a connection, we're
Yeah.
actually part of a family but I've never met
Yeah.
them before, and they
Yeah.
were so welcoming because they value and they seem to have something which we don't, which is the fundamental thing that everyone wants to feel safe, is to be seen and heard. And I really did feel seen and heard over there. So yeah, I did notice a difference.
Love that. I've never been to Canada myself, but I'd love to go. I'd love to go. I think it'd be a right old time. Not least of all because it seems very bloody cold all the time.
Yeah, it certainly
I,
was that.
I like that. I like that. I love the cold. So yeah, if we were going to kind of sum it up and put a kind
Hmm.
of Jerry Springer's final thoughts, almost on the notion of body language. Um, your words make your reality, essentially. So if you are using the term body language, that's gonna strengthen and kind of embolden this understanding that you can learn human beings. You can't. It's
No.
fundamentally untrue. And again, in my opinion, anybody that tells you otherwise is delusional, dishonest, or both. Right? That's just my opinion around that. Nothing more. Make of that what you will.
Yeah,
So if we go on. Sorry,
sorry,
Bob.
no, no, finish. Sorry, Ben.
I would. Well, I was just going to say, does that discount non-verbal behaviour? Not at all. Not at all. But you want to think of the things that you see less in isolation of Ben has his arms folded at the minute, therefore he is in some kind of discomfort. No, because my arms move all the time, they come back to it. It is about this continual process, this continual bringing in of information, and then refining it and bringing it back out, and then bringing it in, and then refining it and bringing it back out. In the same sense, it would be like watching the first 5 minutes of a movie and going, that person is the villain, and sticking to it.
Mm.
Right? You watch the rest of the movie to see how it plays out. That's what the process is. If I was going to sum it up, yes, we're leaving out a lot, but that's the notion of summarizing. It's a continual process. It is a continual taking in, filtering, and feeding back of information for understanding. One of the models that I developed and worked on for this area, I call it Polar, and it
Mm.
stands for people, so not body language, stuff related to just people, their objects, the locations they're in, the actions that they make, and the reasoning that you use to try and formulate your understanding on the back of
Yeah.
it all. Right?
Yeah.
That's the same thing. Go on, Bob. You
Yeah.
were going to say.
No, my final thought is one that an answer to this post that sort of prompted all this that I put on LinkedIn, and it's from a guy I'm not connected to him. His name is Mark Mew, Mehu, and he's an associate professor of psychology at Webster Vienna Private University. And
Okay.
what he says that I understand from what is criticised in this post is the extreme confidence of self-proclaimed body language experts in revealing the meaning of non-verbal cues. This being said, let's not swing over to the other extreme and say that non-verbal analysis are flawed. Non-verbal cues are important pieces of the puzzle of understanding what is not visible about people. Keep researching with an inquisitive rather than self-assured mind, and let's not give up on non-verbal behavior. And I
I
think
like
that
that.
that really sums it up.
Beautiful. Beautiful. As a final thing from the comments, Julie says, "Why don't we call it psychological behavioral analysis?" That's as good a title as any, right?
Um,
It's
I'm going to say that I agree. It's psychological, but psychological is just one discipline. You've got neuroscience. You've got
yeah.
I don't know, but just saying it's behavior analysis is enough, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what I was going to say. It's as good a title as any because to me, it's not about the title.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
not about the title. It's
yeah.
about
It's
what you
it's
do.
100%,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. Yeah. So with that in mind, folks, we are. Yeah, just a thought, Julie. Totally agree with you. It's the same for us. This is all we're doing here. They're just thoughts. we, you know,
Oh,
we,
yeah.
we when we're not claiming some kind of ownership over them. They're just thoughts, comments, observations, if you will, on the way things are going. But yeah, with that in mind, we'll love you and leave you, and we'll see you again next week for another one. He will be at the normal time next week, so we're an hour later than normal, but that's mostly because of my schedule. So rather than skip out, we just delayed a little bit. So next week we'll be back at the normal time, and we'll see you again, folks.
Yeah. Bye.
Have a good one. Oh, that's me end button. There it is. Uh, Julie said thank you at the end.
So she was the only one there, was she?
We had kind of flitting numbers. We went from the highest I saw was 8, but we went from 8 to 6 to 2 to 1 to 2 to 1. They are getting watched. Like when I create the events, the people that I'm allowed to send invites to will only increase based on how many people are watching it, and the available invites have been increasing week by week by week.
Oh, have they?
So
Oh, that's
not very
good.
much. Yeah, not very much. But like I said, that many people who've laid dormant for that long, it
Yeah.
will take it will take some rekindling until the analytics kind of understands and pushes it towards people. So we just got to keep at it, really. Just
Yeah.
got to keep at it.
Yeah. I think that was a good one, Ben.
I liked it. I liked it a lot. I like this. I like that topic a lot because it kind of feels noble to me. Like we're fighting the good fight. you know. Um, yeah.
And the guy I was talking about, look him up. His name's Darren Stanton, is his name.
Oh, I've seen him, like the human lie detector or something
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
that's what he calls himself. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
mean,
nonsense.
I actually did some research on him, and I phoned someone up, and they said he was a complete wanker. So they got rid. I think he was more or less going to get sacked if he didn't leave.
Brilliant. Well, I've seen him on This Morning once, and he was using magic tricks to talk about his life. Hey, don't get me wrong. I've used magic tricks, but that's as a performer. I'm
Yeah.
performing magic. You know.
No, no,
Oh, bless
I
him.
think he's in the same. I mean, have you seen Chase Hughes must have more money than anything. He's always constantly reinventing himself, isn't he? He's now
Yeah,
got
neurocognitive
he's got a
intelligence now.
university now, isn't he? Non-verbal
Yeah,
university. Oh, for God's sake.
load of bollocks. Load of bollocks.
Yeah,
But that's Mr. Hughes in a nutshell. Load of bollocks.
yeah, yeah. But the